Namaste and welcome. It really is my pleasure today to introduce to the Lokvani audience Kunal Botla, who is a student at Tufts University studying architecture and urban planning. But even at this young age, he has already entered politics. He serves at the town of Lexington through the town meeting as the chair of the Transportation Advisory Committee. Now he's also planning to run for the Lexington Planning Board. Kunal, welcome to Lokvani. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you. I'm excited to be here today.
Wonderful. So tell us, what is motivating you as a college student to run for the planning board, and why should people vote for you?
Yeah, I think we're at a very important time. There's a lot of urgency in the world and the town and Massachusetts as a whole. Specifically in Lexington, we're at a point where the town is in transition. We're seeing a lot of development, we're seeing a lot of things changing, and I think it's very important that we take very careful, data-driven decisions and create a data-driven plan at this time. I think Lexington needs someone with a background in architecture and planning and professional academic training in that. And as a student, I have more flexibility with my schedule and have access to a lot of knowledge and information that isn't often as generally available. And I have access to world-class faculty that I'm learning from in real time. And I'm looking to apply that knowledge and that experience to the planning board in the same way that I've been able to do that on town meeting and as chair of the Transportation Advisory Committee.
Fantastic. So, no need to wait. 20 is fine. You want to be a young person on the board. And how have you found as a young person on the town meeting? Has it been a very welcoming place? Has it been challenging for a young college student to be part of the town meeting?
I think there's always opportunities and challenges with something like that. Often I'm the youngest person in the room, but I think that makes it so I have a very unique perspective to offer, that I'm able to talk about things that other people may not have experience with, that I'm able to find solutions in a different way that other folks may, in a way that other folks may not. And that I'm able to kind of blend my energy, new ideas into more traditional systems and strategies and get a really productive solution for everyone.
That's fantastic. I know that across Lexington and neighboring towns like Burlington and Bedford, we are seeing housing pressures and tear downs and lot of modest homes to oversized single family bills. And I think you have spoken about right sized and energy efficient housing as well as the MBTA Communities Act. First of all, what is this MBTA Communities Act? And how can Lexington lead on diverse, sustainable housing in a way that strengthens the entire region instead of pushing problems across town lines?
Yeah. So I'll start with the MBTA Communities Act. That's the kind of like common name of a legislation that was signed a couple of years ago that essentially sets a requirement to allow for more multifamily housing in several, if not all, Eastern Massachusetts communities. And so, that applies to a lot of communities as it is somewhat, but not entirely tied to MBTA service. Lexington has been a leader on this front. Lexington passed the first plan, and the plan has had a lot of implementation. It's seen a lot of use in the last couple of years, and I think we're at a moment where we have to think about how we accommodate this growth, right? We have to think about the opportunities that come from new housing and what lessons we're learning so that when we move forward, we can take very careful strategic decisions. I think you spoke about how we're seeing a lot of smaller homes get turned into much bigger homes. And that's, I think, a big function of the law simply just encouraging that, right? People will do what the law allows for and what opportunities and options they have under it. And I'm hoping that on the planning board, I'm able to help advocate for methods and policies that make it possible to build smaller homes or expand existing homes as opposed to demolishing and rebuilding, especially when we think about, our environmental goals, our sustainability goals. I think it's very important that we preserve what we have that's already built And we think about ways of constructing housing that doesn't involve cutting down trees or forests or conservation land, but instead, makes a better use of spaces that we've already developed.
That's great. And you're telling me this is all possible. Your knowledge of architecture and urban planning is, I'm sure, coming in handy to advocate for policies that are actually practical. Now, one of the things that we as Indian Americans and immigrant families in this region value is multi-generational living. We think about strong neighborhood ties, access to safe transportation, especially for seniors and young people. So, if elected, how would you advocate for zoning, accessory units, and regional transportation planning that support families who live, work, and move across Lexington, Burlington, and the surrounding towns?
Yeah, I'm really proud that on my time in town meeting and as a transportation advisory committee member, have been able to advocate, especially for the transportation component of things. In 2023, I pushed forward a proposal and advocated for a proposal that reduced the annual fare cost or pass cost of Lexpress, Lexington's local bus service, to $20 per year. And so that was, a big reduction from the 300 something that it used to cost before, and made it so that it was a simple no-brainer for a lot of things, right? $20 a year is something you don't think very deeply about. You ride the bus a couple of times. Okay, now that's an option for you. And so that brought up ridership and utilization and taxpayer value to, one of the highest figures in a while. And in addition to that, I've worked with state agencies like the MBTA and MassDOT on figuring out how we can improve MBTA bus service in Lexington, which is especially important for commuters and for folks who are looking to reach Boston and some of the surrounding communities in the area. And that, together has represented a really meaningful increase in, bus usability in Lexington. And that's the only kind of transit Lexington has. So I think it's very important that we work on investing in those resources and those methods in a way that's productive. I think there's a lot of collaboration that happens in these spaces, and it takes a lot of working together and a lot of effort to get these solutions. And I think the same is true for the planning board. When we think about planning communities, when we think about what we want to see, I think having community input, having the community drive their vision through the process is incredibly important. And then on top of that, I think it's incredibly important that we think about how we can bring people in to the communities that they already live in, right? If you have an elder family member who's looking to move in, there's a big opportunity with what you mentioned with accessory dwelling units. Accessory dwelling units are kind of like a additional space that you can add to a lot of single family homes. It takes a lot of different forms. The kind of traditional example is used as like an in-law suite or an additional apartment or accessory apartment in some places that might look like a garage being converted into an apartment or a basement being converted, or it's an expansion on an existing house, or it's something that's done as part of a new construction. But that type of regulation, which has been, authorized throughout the state and Lexington has had since 1984, really creates an opportunity for, having your in-laws or your family live in the same home that you live in and bring that community together so people are not as separated and there are opportunities to live kind of collectively together as a community. I'm hopeful that with my colleagues on the planning board, I will be able to bring some revisions to Lexington's bylaw that make it possible to build more accessible ADUs, as they're called. And so I'm hoping that by, building the support of my colleagues of my colleagues on the planning board, I'll be able to build up that kind of system where we're able to encourage ADUs to be an opportunity for seniors who want to downsize on their own property, as opposed to having to move elsewhere to another community, to another neighborhood, or to another development to have that accessible living situation.
I think that's a great thing. And I know that as young families have children and they're always looking for help from grandparents, I know
Yeah,
this from personal experience. I think having these kinds of ADU or accessible ADUs, especially, I think would make go a long way in making a big difference. And it's very thoughtful of you to start thinking about that. I was intrigued to hear you mention the word seva as you describe your public service. What does Seva mean to you, and how does it guide all the decisions that you do as you move ahead on the planning board and on the town meeting right now?
Yeah, I think, thinking about how community, how the people around us are impacted by our decisions is very, very important. Especially on the planning board, every single decision impacts a community, like the neighbors around a property, the people who are impacted by, the traffic, the noise of construction, all of those factors that come into play. And I'm hoping that on the planning board, I'll be able to advocate for a lot more proactive planning and neighborhood planning as part of the process. Right now, we're seeing a lot of requirements come from the state in terms of definitions, in terms of minimums, in terms of all of these factors that will need management and they'll need planning that anticipates these requirements, but also considers how different communities and different neighborhoods might see different implementations of them. And so I would love to have, more community input, more accessibility throughout the process. I'm the only candidate who's committing to hosting office hours consistently so people can drop by, ask me questions. And I'm looking to advocate for planning board members to receive a town issued email address so that you can email a lexingtonma.gov email address and reach your planning board members in the same way that you would reach members of the select board, of the school committee, or even of town meeting. And so I think having that level of communication and uh, that connection to community is incredibly important, especially with how many more decisions are going to come down the road soon.
Right. So Seva is really about connecting with the community for you and making
Yeah,
sure that the people you're impacting are part of the decision-making process. Is that right?
yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So once we hope you win, once you win, what does success look like to you at the end of your term?
That's a great question. I think we have a lot of specific issues that we're thinking about right now. Housing is increasingly unaffordable, taxes are going up. We have a lot to consider in that realm of things. And I think creating opportunities for more affordable housing, like I mentioned earlier, so that a home doesn't just mean that it's a big single family home, but creates options for folks looking to downsize, for grandparents looking to move in their neighborhood, and really create those options for residents, but then also think about how we can improve affordability of existing homes in terms of shifting the tax burden in Lexington towards commercial properties. Historically, we've had a much higher component of our tax rate come from commercial properties. Today, it's about 20%. And so, as time goes on, if we don't focus on economic development, we'll probably see costly increases to residents. And I think having a very comprehensive plan that's focused on how modern businesses operate and how businesses can be drawn into Lexington through our regulations and our policy framework, by creating guidance and creating a system that's easy to navigate is very important for me. I think we have to do everything we can to prevent the cost of living in Lexington from rising to be a point where it's unaffordable for more people.
That is really beautiful. So I have to ask, I know as a student, your life is pretty busy. You have homeworks, assignments to do. How do you manage your time?
I think, with careful planning and management, which I think are skills for the planning board as well. Um, I think there's a lot that can't be done in a day. A lot of folks manage this with a full-time job. And I think, being involved in the town government has really helped me develop a framework for working these systems, develop a framework in terms of the systems as well as the people that I'm working with. And I think having collaborators and having folks across town government and regional government who can support efforts and teach through the process is incredibly helpful.
Fantastic. Well, good luck to you. I think the town of Lexington could surely benefit from a young person who is thinking innovatively, out of the box, being practical while implementing policy. So I wish you all the best and I thank you for taking the time to talk to me. Namaste.
Thank you.